Democrat side has not used up its full allotment of time, but as another speaker is not here, I'll go ahead and hopefully we'll be able to yield time to them if someone else does come forward. Madam President, I've been on the Senate floor several times now in the last several weeks to discuss our grave economic condition, the need to reduce Washington's out-of-control spending, and most importantly, the urgent need to start taking action before time runs out. If there is any remaining doubt in anyone's mind that the U.S. economy is facing an historic and unprecedented fiscal crisis, consider a few of the recent news reports since I last spoke on the floor, which was just not that many days ago. The report came out saying national unemployment increased to 9.1%, with over 22 million Americans unemployed or underemployed. This is not how we rebound from a recession, historically. There is something more going on here than the normal economic downturns and upturns of the cycles, the economic cycle. This is something of historic proportion. Since I last spoke on this floor, 2 more rating agencies, Moody's and Fitch, have issued serious warnings that it may downgrade America's ratings, AAA debt ratings. This comes after S&P already lowered its outlook of the U.S. economy to negative. And just last week, on the cover of USA Today, was the frightening headline: the United States owes $62 trillion of unfunded obligations, amounting to $534,000 per household. Those are unfunded obligations. We have funded obligations that we currently owe in addition to that, and some put that even higher. There was an interview yesterday by Bill Gross, who heads up PIMCO, the largest holder of bonds, largest bond fund in the country, in the world, actually. Bill Gross told, in this interview, indicated that the money owed to cover future liabilities in entitlement programs in the United States is actually in worse financial shape than Greece and other debt-laden European countries. Much of the public, of course, is focused on our public debt, which is running $14.3 trillion. But what hasn't been focused on as much is the unfunded liabilities that will come due, the obligations and promises already made that will have to be paid for, that will be in addition to the $14.3 trillion already on the books. And taken together, Gross said this is going to equal nearly $100 trillion. It's a number beyond anyone's comprehension of what $100 trillion means to the American taxpayer, to America's ability and obligation and responsibilities to pay its debt. Now, maybe that $100 trillion is a little high. It doesn't matter whether it's 80 or 90 or 100. All of it is certainly something that is going to put our country in a very, very difficult position. I want to read just one more piece from the CNBC interview with Bill Gross. We've always wondered who will buy treasuries, he said, after the Federal Reserve purchases the last of the $600 billion to end the second leg of its quantitative easing program later this month. It's certainly not PIMCO, he said, and it's probably not the bond funds of the world. Madam President, I've quoted Erskine Bowles before about his take, a Democrat, Chief of Staff to President Clinton, who was one of the co-authors of the report that the Commission presented at the request of the President, laying out the dire crisis that we face and recommendations as to how to address it. Erskine Bowles, the co-chair of the President's Fiscal Reform Commission, said, "The growing national debt and federal deficits are, quote, a cancer, and they are truly going to destroy this country from within unless we have the common sense to do something about it." This is the challenge before us. Each member of the House of Representatives and each member of the Senate and the President of the United States. This dwarfs all other matters before us and before this Congress. With all due respect, the Senate's spending several weeks on the Small Business Innovation Research Act, the Federal Aviation Authority Administration's bill, and now the Economic Development Revitalization Act has left little time for the debate that ought to be undertaken on this floor in continuous fashion to address this crisis, because it has implications for the future of our country, the future of this nation. The rapid escalation of the deficit and debt requires our full engagement, not later, but now. The growing consensus among those who have given serious analysis to our fiscal plight calls for an all-of-the-above approach in addressing the problem, including, dare I say it, including entitlement spending, which essentially is Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare. If Congress and the White House are serious about preventing the destruction of our economy, it's time that we get serious about talking about entitlements, including Medicare. Because the hard truth is that if Medicare is not included in the debate, any effort to put together any kind of a credible plan necessary to bring about fiscal integrity will be defeated. Medicare has proven to be the greatest fiscal challenge facing this country. It alone, last year, took in $1.8 trillion of new liabilities, which is more than we spend on all defense non-discretionary spending. Non-discretionary spending is, non-defense discretionary spending is that spending that goes to every other function of the federal government other than interest on our debt that has to be paid, and other than the obligations that have to have mandatory payment, which we don't have control over at this particular point in time. The Medicare trustees recently sounded the alarm bells in a report announcing that the program's total of unfunded future obligation is a staggering $38.4 trillion. They cautioned that the hospital trust fund, known as Medicare Part A, would be exhausted by 2024. This was 5 years earlier than what they had predicted just a year earlier from today. So 1 year has passed, and the trustees are now so alarmed they're saying, we're going to run out of money 5 years earlier than we thought. What are they going to say next year? It'll probably shorten that time even more. Economists and policy experts on both sides of this aisle, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, have been warning about the dangers of Medicare spending and the impact on our national debt for years. And yet Congress has pushed its responsibilities forward, always will take care of it after the next election. Back in 2006, Chairman of the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan, warned lawmakers, saying that Medicare spending is unsustainable and could one day drive government debt and interest rates substantially higher. Madam President, I suggest that date is here, and it's knocking on our door. Michael Cannon, Director of Health Policy Studies at the Cato Institute, said, and I quote, "Nothing presents as great a threat to the federal budget and therefore to economic growth as the persistent and rapid growth of Medicare." And at a White House summit last year, President Obama recognized the unsustainability of entitlement spending. This is a quote from our president. "Almost all of the long-term deficit and debt that we face relates to the exploding costs of Medicare and Medicaid. Almost all of it. That is the single biggest driver of our federal debt. And if we don't get control over that, we can't get control over our federal budget." I am quoting the words of the President of the United States, who now has taken the position that we shouldn't address the Medicare problem. And yet, as president, he has said almost all of our deficit and debt that we face relates to the exploding costs of these two programs, Medicare and Medicaid. And he repeats it by saying almost all of it, the single biggest driver of our federal debt. Alice Rivlin, who served as budget director under President Bill Clinton, said it best, "There's no mystery about what we ought to do. We just need to get on with it." Mr. President, we just need to get on with it. But that hasn't happened. And despite the President's own recognition of the single biggest driver of our federal debt, and despite the warning sirens from economists and even the Medicare trustees, the President has yet to submit a single proposal to address this urgent problem. Others in positions of leadership have also decided to ignore these critical warnings about Medicare and its looming insolvency and threat to our fiscal house. They've rejected any proposals for, quote, changing Medicare as we know it. Well, this category of people are the do-nothings. I wonder if I could just ask for 2 more minutes.
Without objection.
Unanimous consent for that. Thank you. Let me skip forward here. This has not happened. Despite the President's own recognition of it, we have not taken this plan forward. There are do-nothings who think that if we do nothing, Medicare will be secure. Actually, the do-nothings are the ones that are making Medicare insecure. It is those that have taken the responsibility to stand up and recognize this problem and be free and open and debate and be honest with the American people. They're the ones that have had the courage to go forward, and yet they get reviled for, quote, throwing grandma under the bus or taking Medicare away. I was approached by a person in a factory in Indiana just last week, and it came up to me and said, "You're taking away my 88-year-old mother's health care." He was upset, and rightfully so, but he was also, I told him he needed to be, he's upset at the wrong person, because we're trying to save that health care. We're trying to save Medicare. We have two options, Madam President, and I will conclude with this. We can either continue with the status quo and let Medicare go bankrupt, or we can step up to the plate, debate thoughtful proposals, and work to keep our promise to America's seniors by enacting meaningful reform. It is those of us that are willing to step up to the plate that are here to save Medicare, not destroy Medicare. It is those that are saying we need to do nothing or refuse to do anything that are going to cause Medicare to go bankrupt and take benefits away from the seniors. This is the debate that we've had. We are burdened by this. We need to address it. It's a challenge of the day. Let's get forward, stand up, and do the right thing. Madam President, I appreciate the extension of time and yield back my time, whatever is left.
Madam President.
The senator from Georgia.
Madam President, I ask that I be